Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to DASICON 2021, Empowering Women, Much Considered, Least Conceptualized. I am moderator HUGHES, and in this session, we shall be turning to look at why feminism needs men. We'll look at resolving the gap between men and women, how this can be done, and the necessity of inclusion of men in gender equity efforts. We really aim to show this afternoon that feminism can be masculine too. The structure of today's session is fairly simple. I will start with a brief introduction of our speakers today, followed by their individual presentations, where they will give comments and their experiences in the roles and relating to today's topic. And after each one of these, we will ask them one direct question. After all three presentations, we will return back to a questions period from all our participants. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers. Firstly, we have Chairman of the Board of Directors at RHI Magnesita, Dr. Herbert CORDT, the Rector of Wirtschaftsuniversität Wien, computer scientist and researcher, and Professor for Gender and Diversity in Organizations, Professor Edeltraud HANAPPI-EGGER. And finally, but by no means least, we have founder and co-president for HeForShe Vienna, social innovation consultant, Gerhard WAGNER. So I would now like to hand over to Dr. CORDT to give his brief presentation.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very proud to be here on this panel. And if you allow me to say this, the topic is interesting, the way it's phrased. Why feminism needs men, in fact, already implies an answer. And it implies that indeed feminism needs men. I think a more neutral headline would have been, does feminism need men? But I would like to commend the organizers for having taken a stance. Why? Obviously, feminism needs men, but not all feminists would agree on that, because the diversity of feminist theories is as diverse as women are, and it's good so. Let's discuss now the role of men in feminism in general. And those of you who have listened this morning, obviously you know, and everybody else probably knows as well, there are so many different schools of thought in feminism, but one can differentiate two main thought lines. One is the equality feminism, and the other one is the difference feminism. And basically the difference of these two schools of thought is, where is the end? What's the end goal? And here I should say, I personally find myself squarely in the camp of equality feminism. The goal is equal chances for all genders. I may repeat, equal chances for all genders. I see myself as a contributor to this goal. I would like to be an ally, and I fully commit to gender equality. Now, before I would like to talk about my own contribution that I can add to this agenda, which is so important, I should briefly introduce RHI Magnesita, which is the company that I have the honor to chair. We are an Austrian headquartered company in Vienna, which is registered in Holland, in Amsterdam, and we are listed in the London Stock Exchange. It's a company, we have roughly 2.5 billion revenues, 12,000 people, very global. We have 30 operations, 30 from Brazil, North America, Mexico, Europe, Turkey, India, China. And we have roughly 4,500 female, white-collar people, and the remainder is blue-collar. And this per se will indicate how difficult it is to come to grips with this gender equality. We are a manufacturer of products that are used in the heavy industry in steel, cement, and glass. And just to give you an idea what we do, without our products, there wouldn't be a phone, not a car, not a glass, no nothing in the world. Because we are instrumental in doing this. We are a company producing heat abrasive materials to protect the assets of our customers. We operate from 1200 degrees onwards up to 2600 degrees centigrade. Now, so much for the introduction of RHI Magnesita. So what is my own contribution? You know, we can say, talk is cheap, as the Americans say. and I would like to walk the talk. First, I listen. I listen to women in private and professional environment. I see how they struggle. I think that I would hope to understand their struggle. And I think it's important to be aware of the fact that there are gender issues. And this comes from an Austrian who is heading an international company. And this has obviously shaped also my view on that. So my first contribution is I listen. My second contribution is, and I'm happy you cannot see that I'm blushing now, but it was our head of communication, Lisa Fuchs, who also is head of diversity in our company, who encouraged me, actually, she forced me to say that, to tell you the following: I'm personally committed to this with a scholarship that I have donated to the Diplomatic Academy. And I'm not interfering into academic affairs, but I have asked for two conditions to be met. One is the applications must come from Eastern Europe on a wider scale. So it's not only the classical European definition of where Eastern Europe lies. And secondly, this is important, there must be women. So there must be women from Eastern Europe that qualify for this scholarship. It's called Herbert CORDT Scholarship for Excellence. And I'm proud to say that we already have alumni. And presently there are 3 students under the scholarship that are enrolled in the Diplomatic Academy. And thirdly, to act structurally. How can I do this? And I would like to term it, that's the applied equality feminism at RHI and Magnesita. The largest, the most important level in our company is the board of directors, which runs the company. We have 13 directors, of which I have committed to have 1/3 of women directors, female directors, until 2021. And this is now, actually by June, when we have our next AGM in Holland, we'll have more than 30%, 33%, we'll have 38%. Number 2, we have committed to have 1/3 women on the top 4 levels of management until 2025. Today, this sounds very easy. We have 18. So in the next 4 years, we basically have to double this amount. And this, believe me, is very, very ambitious and very difficult to achieve. Why? Because what it really means is we have to, in the next 4 years, every year we've got to promote more than 10 female additional leaders. And what it does, and here comes what makes life not so easy, if you promote one gender, you offer less opportunities, few opportunities for the other gender. So we are cognizant of the fact that we may lose or will lose talented male. But how do we go about? The actions to fill the pipeline with female future leaders is very important. You know, you would all agree, and certainly for Dr. HANAPPI-EGGER, leaders and female leaders don't fall from the sky. So we have to recruit them. We do anonymous applications, so there's no bias in the way we phrase the position we're looking to fill. And equally important, in the final round, when it comes to a decision-making process, there always must be one woman in the 3 finalists. Secondly, we try to identify female talents once we have them in the company. We make them a talent and performance review. We train the future leaders, development programs, networking opportunities, coaching and mentoring tables. And finally, and now comes, in German we would say, wo der Hase im Pfeffer liegt, where push comes to shove, as the Americans say. In order to reach the target, we've got to decide. We have to make decisions. And decisions are never easy. If it would be easy, actually everybody else would do it. So what we have to do is, we have to realize that to decide, is the radical step it takes to come to gender equality. And why do I support this equality feminism with men being instrumental in this movement? Because it's us, it's the men to decide to promote and to help women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. CORDT. That was a fascinating insight into what can be done in the world to promote gender equality. Now, one thing that a lot of our participants have raised as an important issue, and you briefly touched on this, is why do men often feel threatened by gender equality? You highlighted that it has so many benefits for everyone, really, when we truly achieve this. I was just wondering if you could elucidate a bit further on why men do feel so threatened sometimes.
Okay, thank you for this question. I don't want to reduce this to men being frightened from women, but I would put this in a much broader context by encouraging diversity. There are many people in an organization, in a societal environment who are threatened by diversity because it spreads the boys from the men. It separates the boys from the men. And actually, the gender issue must be seen, as I feel and we feel in our company, also as a diversity issue. I know it's not uncontroversial. The fact, however, is diversity in the corporate sense adds to the improvement of the company, and it's a corporate goal. But as gender equality or feminism per se is more so a societal issue. But on a corporate level, they both come together. So I would not reduce this to men being afraid of competition from women, but at a larger scale, diversity creates opportunities, but only for those who are willing to see and able to react and act on them.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I would now like to turn to our second speaker, Dr. Edeltraud HANAPPI-EGGER.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you also for having me here. I would like to go one step back and kind of recall what we are talking about if we are talking about gender, and at the same time label it as a question of being a man or being a woman, because I think this is not an adequate label for the topics we have. Now, why? What we can, of course, see is, and that's the topic of your conference, is that we do have some gender phenomena, like we do not have an adequate representation of female leaders, for instance. And as the rector of the University of Economics and Business, of course, I am delivering 50% of my graduates who are females, and I'm always wondering, where are they in the top management positions in the business world? Now, what is actually happening if we go, if we think a little bit, these gender issues coming up in top management levels? What we obviously do is we live in a binary system. So we are always talking about men and women, and we prevent to be able to clearly define the different groups and to clearly define what are the differences between men and women, which might become rather tricky if you go along with, having some additional diversity issues like education and so on and the like. However, we live culturally in a culturally constructed binary system, distinguishing between men and women. And obviously, we again do have culturally constructed gender role expectations. So we have an idea of what women should be and how they should be, and about men, how they should be and what they should be. Now, if you compare this with some of our job descriptions, like in top management, then normally you would have a kind of a formal education issue, like saying, you should have studied, I don't know, math, or you should be a graduate in business or whatsoever. So we have this formal education issue. But then we find very often in job descriptions, we find things or attributes we would call gender codes, like saying, well, you should have a broad analytical thinking, or you should have, I don't know, soft skills or communicative skills. And those are basically also, again, in a binary system, there seems to be an adequate match. So women would match feminine codes and men would match masculine codes. And then, of course, we also have an area in this job description how you should be. Like, you know, we are expecting flexibility, we are expecting mobility, availability, stress resistance, and all these kind of things. But actually, to go, you know, to deconstruct those messages, then you very easily come up with that this refers to the private living circumstances, and these are gendered living circumstances. So taking into account that we have those gendered job descriptions, and we match this with a binary gender system, then of course we have those distinctions, and then there's suddenly a kind of a very natural match of what women should be and what men should, what women should do and what men should do. Now, and based on this system, we have this phenomenon we call a glass ceiling, saying that at a certain time, it seems that there is a bad match between being a woman and being a leader or a top manager, or being a man and being a top manager, which seems to be more natural and which is also historically a natural way. Now, what we can see is that there is, of course, some progress. And we can see that more and more women are also top managers, and we have very good examples as given by Herbert, that there are more and more business leaders are aware of the fact that they are wasting resources by not hiring qualified women, but by sticking to kind of a stereotype and a kind of an, you know, unconscious bias in the selection process. Now, what we do have and what we can see is more and more women in top management positions. But what happens is what I would call, it's not about glass ceiling anymore, but it's about glass filtering. So those who share their understanding of leadership, those who share the values of what it means to be a top manager, they are matching those expectations. And this could also be, of course, women. So what we see is, for instance, if you have studies about the self-understanding of female top managers and male top managers, then we can say that it does not matter if they are a man or woman, but very often it matters which business schools at which business school they have been. So they have similar leadership style, they have similar values, they have a similar understanding of what it means to be a good manager. So they kind of, you know, accept those gendered job descriptions of being in management. But what we also can see, and this is then something we cannot fix by encouraging women, we cannot fix it by recruiting women and doing some kind of talent management. This we only can fix if we get an understanding of structural changes we need. Because these different rules of the game means that women and men are judged differently in their management roles, because in particular women who are kind of taking over a masculine, so to say, masculine coded job is kind of, you know, suffering from what we call the role incongruity. So this does not fit to the gender role in society, does not fit to the gender role in the business. So therefore, we have an interesting phenomenon, what we call double binding. So in particular, female managers, if they would, you know, have the same management style and the same leadership style, then they are very often judged as being not, you know, as being too male. They're not feminine anymore. But if they have a different way of leadership, if they have a different way of management, then they are not professional anymore, because this is not the expectation related to being a manager. And this is a very difficult thing, you know, to handle. So my reflection and my answer to the question, do we need men? I would say no, we don't need men and we don't need women. Actually, we need a deep understanding of how those gendered structures work. And we have to change the structures to allow diversity. And I don't speak about diversity in those biological dimensions, but I would say we need a kind of an anti-categorical approach, saying how can we change our organizational structures and our culture, business culture, to allow for more diverse living circumstances and different understandings of what it means to be a manager. Thank you.
Thank you again very, very much for another insightful discussion there. Now, we've had a few questions in similar lines of to what you've been saying here today and sort of discussing structural changes. And even earlier today, Ambassador Brigitte Blaha mentioned breaking down the generational divide that exists in these leadership structures. And I was wondering if you had any sort of suggestions or ways forward that we can sort of break into breaking down these structures and the sort of people who hold these leadership positions but aren't necessarily willing to change, as fundamentally in 2021, waiting for that to happen is not necessarily the game to play.
Well, again, I would like to refer to Herbert, what he said, namely what is good for business. And good for business is very simply to reflect on the organizational values, for instance, and this is a cultural issue. For instance, I don't know, is it really so important that you are available for 24 hours? I would say no. Is it really so important to be a workaholic? I would say no, because we know from other studies that the performance of workaholics, after a while, there's a high risk of heart attacks and whatsoever. So I think that the basic idea is to question the management expectations we have and the job description, so to say, and what is really important and what counts and what is a value, you know, and then we could have a new concept of management, and then we could question the organizational culture and change it, and then it would be definitely more inclusive. And by the way, this would also help male leaders to have you know, a better work-life balance, to have a better, you know, quality of their job and so on. So it's not about women's issue, it's about inclusiveness in the same time with respect to diversity.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Finally, I'd like to turn towards our third speaker, Gerhard Wagner from HeForShe Vienna.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and I'm very happy to be here, especially very happy to talk about this very particular and specific topic. I've been talking about the role of men in feminism for quite some time now. I founded HeForShe Vienna 5 years ago, and since then I've been engaged in different formats and roles, trying to encourage men to become active agents of change, because that's what I think men have to be in the gender equality movement. And this topic of this question of what's the role of men in feminism and in gender equality has never received so much attention as in the past couple of months. I have been talking about this topic very, very often, and I think talking about it is a first good step. But now it's high time to actually walk the talk. So why does feminism need men? And I would like to take a more structural stance towards the topic and get back to a level of representation. And I will be using the binary labeling and binary system we predominantly still live in, unfortunately, just to make my argument. And the answer to the question of the role of men in feminism for me is pretty straightforward and very easy to spot if we look around, because no matter where we look, we are living in a men's world. We are living in an androcentric society, meaning that the masculine is the norm, and the masculine is at the center of our societal mindset. So if you want to be successful, for instance, and shatter this glass ceiling, then you have to adopt some male leadership, or as it is associated to be a male leadership competencies or skills. And this androcentric worldview, this man-centered worldview, also manifests itself in structural male dominance. And this, for me, is a very important part of this discussion, because men are occupying most influential positions in politics, in science, and in the corporate world. We are sitting at the levers of power, and we are deciding on how a society and societal life should look like. So just to stress this point, let's look at politics, for instance. Our National Council has a women's share of 40%. Women are making up 51% of our country's population, so they are definitely underrepresented there. But these 40% already are an historic all-time high. We started off at 5% 100 years ago. And if we take this down to a local level, in the 2095 municipalities in Austria, we have only 23% women among the local politicians. And if we look at the mayors, there are only 8% female mayors. So that's not enough. And the picture is the same if we go to the world of business. 82% of top position in Austria's companies are still held by men. There is only 8% female managing directors. And when we look at the executive boards, according to EY and the count they did last year, we only see 14 women, which equals to 7.3%. That's just not enough. And this structural underrepresentation, this lack of visibility for women in these positions of power also creates a sense of male entitlement, to positions, to power, to wealth, and to influence. And this male entitlement then again fosters the patriarchal structure of our society we live in. And this results in many challenges for the gender equality movement, but that's then again, these challenges are a different side of the story. The side of the story I want to stress and shed light upon is that this structural male dominance in our society also results in men being the gatekeepers of societal change. If men are positioned at the levers of power, if we make decisions that shape our society and our future, then we have to get men aboard as active leaders of change in order to move faster and more easily towards a more gender equal world. Men, we are part of the problem, but we are also part of the solution. It's literally in our hands, and it's our responsibility to contribute our share to a more gender equal world. Women have been fighting long enough on their own. It's time to join forces. It's time to move forwards together. It's time to move towards a more just and fair society, free from oppressing stereotypes and gender roles. It doesn't matter which gender we are talking about. Stereotypes and gender roles are there for all genders. And that's what we at HeForShe Vienna are trying to achieve. We encourage men in particular to become active agents of change, because together we can achieve a gender equal world much faster. And in the end, this will benefit all of us, women and men alike, all people, all genders. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gerhard. That was a very, very interesting, and I think you raised some very pertinent points. So much so that we actually have our first participant question from Olivia Christman. And I would just like to say that after she has taken the floor and posed her question, if we could first turn to Gerhard for his response, then Edeltraud, and then Dr. Herbert, please. Thank you. Olivia, feel free to pop up if you would like to.
Hi. Yes, my question is, we were talking a little bit about stereotypes in women in the workplace. Is there only one stereotype that affects how people or women are portrayed, and how can they combat this if they don't fit to it? Like, what are the repercussions if they don't match this stereotype?
Thank you very much for this very, very interesting question. I believe there are many different stereotypes women and men and all genders have to face on a daily basis. There is an ideal perception of what it means to be a man, of what it means to be a woman in our society. There is an ideal perception of what it means to be a leader and have leadership position. And if you don't comply to these expectations, at least if I can briefly take a step into the masculinity theories, if you don't comply with these expectations and these stereotypes and norms, then you kind of risk, you're at the risk of losing your position among in this hierarchy of men, because we also have to prove our masculinity to other men, and that's something that can also be transferred to the business world. If you want to become a leader, you have to, in our perception, you have to comply with certain expectations, you have to comply with certain skills. And at the moment, fortunately, this is changing, and there are more skills with which gain in importance. But it is a barrier to leadership if you don't comply with these expectations. But we are on a good way to kind of open it up and become a more inclusive society and business world.
So I mean, it just looks like, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't say that stereotypes are a bad thing. We need stereotypes all the time in order to reduce complexity in social interactions. So it's a kind of, a cultural pattern, and it's a scheme of an interpretation scheme in an unknown situation, and stereotyping therefore helps you to kind of gain control over this social interaction. So that's just actually that's a cognitive capability we have. It becomes problematic if you are making decisions based on stereotypes, so you have an idea of what men should be or how they behave, and you have stereotypes related to your personal perspective on women, but of course also you have stereotypes in mind when you are talking about Swedish guys or about, I don't know, whatsoever group you have. So you're learning these stereotypes, you're learning by training and by educating and being exposed to social interactions. And it even might be that you never meet a Swede, but you know who he or she is, right? So this kind of thing. Now this is, I would say, it's not per se problematic, but now if you have those idea of men are like this and women are like this, and then you meet a person and you identify this person as being a man or being a woman, and you would immediately assign all those attributes, all those group labels to the person, and saying, well, because Gerhard is a man, this is the reason why he is socially incompetent. He is very analytically inspired and this kind of thing, without, for instance, and then you are offering him a job or you are refusing a job, then you are in the area of discrimination. And this is a heavy an issue. So actually, to find out if Gerhard is a good candidate for a job, you simply have to test him. You can't just assume because he is a man, he's a wonderful mathematic guy, but he's, I don't know, a disaster in nursing or this kind of thing. So the stereotypes could lead you to discrimination, and this of course is then problematic, and this would mean that you are excluding people from getting promotion or getting a job because your decision is based on stereotypes and not on knowledge or on assessment results and this kind of thing.
Well, I think this is a fascinating discussion, and I like the comments. I like to listen. And I should say the following in terms, before I would comment a little bit what Edeltraud said on this question, which I thought was interesting too. Today, there was a book published in Germany by an Austrian coach and a management consultant. And the book's title is Typisch weiblich, typisch männlich, typically female, typically male. And when you listen to what she has to say about that, Terinka is her name, Rose Terinka, it's interesting that obviously stereotypes play a big role in decision-making. And the question, this leads to what Gerhard rightly mentioned, and the question was, there are many stereotypes we've got to deal with. The question is, first of all, let's not discuss and decide along stereotypical lines, But how can we overcome that? It means we've got to realize first that we are moving ourselves and we are living in this realm of stereotypes. So cognizance is the first thing. And secondly, one of these stereotypes is that kids have to be raised by the woman, by the mother, or that parental leave only goes with female gender. So I should tell you something. My son is working in Berlin in a startup. And when I discussed with him our topic today, and we talked about this parental leave, he said, "Daddy, you're talking, you're a Rector." I said, "Why?" He said, he is in the executive board there in this company. They have 2,500 people all over the world. He says, in Berlin, parental leave for men is equally frequent as parental leave for women. So therefore, this stereotype that you cannot hire a woman because she's less reliable, because she eventually will give birth to a child and then she's out for I don't know how many years. This is completely not applicable to the startup scene in Berlin, for instance. So what is this? What does this tell us? That there is progress if we want to doing it. And I would like to comment what Edeltraud said, because I thought you had very rightly pointed to this gender trigger words in resumes or in job applications. And exactly this is why we have changed to an anonymous format that does not allow for analytical thinking. Analytical thinking, as we all know, is primarily men think that they are attracted to that. So we try to put it in a different phraseology because we believe we would like to get the best talents and not the stereotyped ones. And secondly, again, Edeltraud, you mentioned the necessity for structural change. Yes, I think as a corporation, we do what we possibly can do. And I would tell you how difficult it is. We have one of our mining operations nearby Graz in Breitenau. And this is a mining operation. We have 250 people there, all men. So a few years ago, a 15-year-old girl wanted to become an apprentice. And so our plant manager said, no, because it's too complicated. We would have to create female toilets, female locker rooms, and female showers. Of course, we made him do it. But just imagine that a 15-year-old girl has the guts to start to work in a man-dominated, very male industry is so laudable, is so commendable that we've got to do everything to support that. One thing, we did it, she's still the only one, unfortunately. India, we employ 1,500 people in India. There we have completely different issues, equally serious. There, women are being, not harassed is the wrong word, they're being physically attacked when they want to step out. So they didn't even dare to talk about that. So we thought, how can we cope with this issue, which is a very serious one? So we have installed cameras all over the place. And only this has helped us stop the molesting of women. This is so, what I'm trying to tell you is we talk from a very high level, and there's still many things to improve. But globally speaking, there are so many more different, more pressing issues that we are confronted with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. There is some serious food for thought in those responses to Olivia's question. I would now just like to remind everyone we are running a little short on time, so if we can keep our answers sort of short and concise, but that would be very helpful, as we will now turn towards Marta Wawrzyniak, who has a question for you all.
Thank you so much. I recently came across the article written and published by The Guardian, which stated that in more gender equal societies, men are half as likely to be depressed, less likely to commit suicide, and have around 40% smaller risk of dying in violent death. So I would like to ask our speakers that, in your opinion, how crucial are these mental health aspects to encouraging men into the feminist sphere and demonstrating that a more equal society is truly a more safe and healthier society? And is this a way to show that men needs feminism too? Thank you.
Thank you. Gerhard, would you mind starting for us? And we'll go in the same order, please.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. I think stressing the mental health topic is a very important one when we try to include, when we're talking about the role of, when we talk about what's in it for men in feminism, and if they are engaged as active agents of change. Because that's exactly also what we see on an Austrian level. For instance, there was a study conducted in 2018, I think, which showed the same results, that men are prone to suffer from certain diseases on a more in a stronger, or are more affected by certain diseases than women. So we have to have a gender lens on all aspects of life, and gender equal society or feminism then also sheds light on these aspects and frees men from these gender roles and this idealistic perception of what it means to be a man. And this idealistic perception is a very unhealthy one. So if we free men from these gender roles as well, then there is a lot in there in feminism for men, freeing them up and providing them with more opportunities to be their true selves and live happier and healthier lives. There are studies proving that as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Gerhard. And I just would add one sentence, namely that we of course have to be aware that this is also, and as a gender balance is also an issue of, reshuffling the power hierarchies. And those who have been the privileged one are heavily in question. And this is not a win-win situation in their eyes. That's a win-lose situation. And the losers, of course, will suffer however they will deal with these conflicts. So the basic idea is, again, to frame and to think over how can different groups really get an advantage of a new system. And this only goes via structural changes and new understandings of organizational cultures and values.
This is an interesting aspect, because it seems to me that obviously mental health at large is a big issue in corporations, and stress and overly stressful situations, respectively, conditions in a company or in life, are always harmful. So I would like to take one step further and not simply look at this article that I haven't read this article in The Guardian, but I should also say two more comments. One is, I could also argue that the fact that we talk about gender equality, men feel under pressure because they may fade out or may be pushed out by more qualified women. And so I think this works both ways. And secondly, one of the topics that has been mentioned which is of extreme importance, is we've got to devote more resources and we have to look deeper into gender medicine, because it's something that we basically have neglected so far in modern medical terms. And maybe this is also a lesson we can draw from that.
Thank you all very much for those, yet again, further insightful answers to these fantastic questions we have coming in. I would now very quickly like to turn to Heinrich Warenland, who I believe has a question for Professor HANAPPI-EGGER. Heinrich, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you. Thank you all for your highly insightful contributions. I have a question for Professor HANAPPI-EGGER concerning your new concepts of management and corporate culture. In your scientific work, how do you deal with the established quote-unquote essentialist concepts in psychology, which imply that it will be hard to change the ways in which we organize and conduct corporate culture and competition, because these structures, according to these findings, are based on the character traits of the most dominant individuals in personality distributions, both in the male and in the female population. So how would you meet these critics who think there is an obstacle in the very nature of human personality traits for changing corporate culture? Or would you hope that personality traits are overall socially constructed? Thank you.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I don't believe in those biological perspective, and it's a very strong essentialism, because as we know that we have the social interactions and we learn and train things, and this can be easily be seen by comparing different cultural issues. You know, if you go to the Asian world, or if you're talking about, you know, the European context compared to other contexts, you can very easily see that there's a cultural context has a tremendous input on the way we perceive our society and we shape our society. So I definitely would count on education and on awareness raising and on a political action.
Fantastic. Well, we are now unfortunately out of time. I know there are still some questions waiting, but we have another breakout session coming on in a few short moments. So I would very quickly like to thank all of our speakers, Gerhard WAGNER, Professor Edeltraud, HANAPPI-EGGER, and Dr. Herbert CORDT, for their fantastic thought-provoking insights into today's topic. And thank you to all of you, our participants at home and all over the world, wherever you may be, for helping bring some more questions to today's progress and thought. I'd just like to remind everyone that we do have an open session at the end of the day starting at 4:30. So if you do have any questions left over, please do come to that and we will try and get to them then. And all is left for me to do is say thank you very much and have a lovely rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.